The first thing everyone noticed was the cane. It tapped softly against the sidewalk, steady and careful, like a heartbeat refusing to rush. People glanced once, then looked away, pretending not to stare, pretending not to judge. But on that cold evening, outside a small coffee shop glowing warm against the dark streets of a quiet American town, the cane felt louder than any sound. It carried a story before its owner ever could. And no one there knew that this simple blind date, ranged with hopeful nerves and hidden fears, was about to change two broken lives forever. If you believe that kindness can heal wounds we never talk about, if you believe in second chances and unexpected grace, then pause for a moment right now. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel to support stories that remind us humanity still matters. Her name was Grace Miller, a name her mother once said was chosen like a prayer. Grace had grown up in Ohio, raised in a small Christian home where Sundays meant church pews and quiet hymns, and weekdays meant learning how to be strong without asking for too much. At 28, life had not turned out the way she imagined as a little girl sitting in the front row of the sanctuary. A car accident 3 years earlier had taken more than her sense of safety. It had damaged her vision permanently, leaving her with blurred shadows and light, enough to see shapes but not faces, enough to move but never without caution. The cane was not a weakness to her, but the world treated it like one. She had almost canceled the date. The idea of meeting a stranger, of being judged before being known, sat heavy in her chest all afternoon. Online profiles never showed canes. They never showed scars or the quiet loneliness that followed you home at night. But her best friend insisted, reminding her that hiding was not the same as healing. So Grace dressed carefully, choosing a soft blue sweater that made her feel calm, and prayed before leaving her apartment, asking God not for love, but for courage. Across town, Daniel Harper sat in his car longer than necessary, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes closed. At 36, he carried a tiredness that sleep never fixed. Daniel was a single father, raising his 8-year-old son Noah since his wife passed away 5 years earlier from an illness that moved faster than faith alone could stop. He worked as a high school history teacher, steady and dependable, the kind of man students trusted and colleagues respected. But inside, Daniel lived cautiously. His life revolved around school lunches, bedtime prayers, and making sure Noah never felt alone. Dating had not been part of his world for a long time. He agreed to the blind date not because he was searching for romance, but because he was tired of telling himself that his story had already ended. The woman he was meeting had been described as kind, thoughtful, and strong. Daniel smiled at that word, strong, because he knew strength was rarely loud. It was usually quiet, patient, and unseen. When Grace arrived, the bell above the coffee shop door chimed softly. Warm air wrapped around her, carrying the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon. She stood still for a moment, letting her eyes adjust, her cane guiding her forward. Conversations hummed around her, laughter rising and falling like waves. She felt exposed, aware of her movements, aware of the space she took up. She wondered if Daniel was already there, if he was watching, if he regretted coming. Daniel saw her before she reached the counter. He noticed the cane immediately, yes, but what held his attention was the way she moved. Not fragile, not helpless, but careful, intentional. There was a quiet dignity in her posture, a resilience that reminded him of early mornings after his wife's diagnosis, when strength meant simply standing up again. Something in his chest softened. Their date unfolded gently, without the awkwardness either had feared. They talked about faith, about small-town childhoods, about favorite seasons and memories tied to church potlucks and Christmas Eve services. Grace spoke honestly about her vision, not as a tragedy, but as a reality she lived with every day. Daniel listened, not with pity, but with respect. He spoke about Noah, about learning how to braid hair for school events, and how grief had reshaped his understanding of love. Time moved quietly, unnoticed, until the coffee shop lights dimmed slightly, signaling closing time. Outside, night had settled in fully, and the temperature had dropped. Grace felt a familiar tension rise in her shoulders. Walking in the dark was always harder. Streetlights blurred into halos, shadows deepened, and every step required more focus. She did not want to seem difficult. She did not want to ask for help. They stepped outside together, the cold air sharp against their faces. Cars passed by, headlights streaking across Grace's limited vision. Daniel noticed the subtle change in her pace, the way her cane tapped more carefully now. Without thinking, without planning, he slowed his steps to match hers. It was not a grand gesture. It was instinct, shaped by years of walking beside a child learning to ride a bike, by hospital hallways and quiet vigils. They walked toward the parking lot, side by side, the space between them filled not with words but with understanding. For Grace, something unexpected happened. The tension in her chest eased. The night felt less heavy. She realized she was no longer counting every step. The presence beside her grounded her, not because he led, but because he walked with her, matching her rhythm, respecting her pace. In that simple act, something shifted. Grace felt seen, not as a condition, not as a limitation, but as a woman worthy of companionship without explanation. Daniel felt it too, a warmth spreading through him, a reminder that love did not always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it arrived like a steady footstep beside you, saying without words, "You are not alone." Over the weeks that followed, their connection grew slowly, intentionally. Daniel met Grace's world with curiosity and care, learning how she navigated daily life, how she memorized spaces, how she trusted sound and memory more than sight. Grace met Daniel's world with compassion, understanding the quiet grief that lingered in his home, the way Noah still asked questions about heaven at bedtime. They prayed together, shared meals, attended church side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, each touch carrying gratitude rather than urgency. Grace met Noah one Sunday afternoon, nervous in a way she had not felt in years. But children saw differently. Noah did not see a cane or blurred vision. He saw someone who listened to his stories, who laughed at his jokes, who knelt beside him to pray. In his innocence, he reached for Grace's hand without hesitation, and she felt something inside her heal just a little more. Challenges did not disappear. Grace still faced days when the world felt overwhelming, when independence came with exhaustion. Daniel still faced nights when grief returned quietly, reminding him of what he had lost. But now they faced those moments together, not fixing each other, not rescuing, just walking alongside, trusting that God's grace filled the spaces they could not. Months later, on an early autumn evening, Daniel and Grace walked through a park near their town. Leaves crunched underfoot, the air crisp and alive. Grace carried her cane, but she leaned less heavily on it now, not because her vision had changed, but because her confidence had. Daniel walked beside her, as he always did, their steps naturally aligned. People passed them without noticing anything unusual. And that, Grace realized, was the miracle. Not invisibility, but normalcy. Not perfection, but peace. As the sun dipped below the trees, Grace felt a fullness in her heart that brought quiet tears to her eyes. She thought back to that first night, the fear she almost let stop her from showing up. She thought about how one simple act of kindness, one man choosing to walk with her instead of ahead of her or away from her, had changed the course of her life. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of patience, compassion, and walking beside someone through their darkness, then please take a moment now. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel to help spread stories that matter. And before this story ends, I have one special request for you. Please comment below and share what kindness means to you, or a moment when someone walked with you during a hard season. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Grace and Daniel's story did not end with fireworks or dramatic confessions. It continued in everyday faithfulness. School mornings, doctor appointments, church services, and quiet prayers at night. It continued in the choice to stay, to walk together, even when the path was unclear. And in that steady companionship, they found something deeper than romance. They found grace, lived out in footsteps, side by side, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with seeing clearly, but with choosing to walk together anyway.